Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky Shea. That is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, what do you think about me getting the name of the show right?
Congratulations. There's a first time for everything. And
Yeah.
I'm surprised you recognized it was me. I'm trying to hide behind my beard here, but somehow you still knew.
Yeah, you're getting ready for the
MLB playoffs. I'm getting a pre-beard in for the NHL playoffs.
Oh, okay. I was thinking this is more of like a hey, camp has started in the NBA beard.
Right. Yeah, I wear this beard during preseason, NBA preseason. That's what I do. Actually, it's just a sly little plug that if you want to see me with a beard, then you got to go over to the YouTube channel. If you're listening to us on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, and you want to see a beard, go to YouTube. Search Basketball by Association, BbA, and Arky Shea. This is episode 79, and no player in NBA history has worn number 79. So we're going to go to the year 1978-79. Not exactly a well-known year for a lot of people, although the Seattle Supersonics did win their only NBA championship that year against the Washington Bullets, two teams that no longer really exist. The MVP of that year was very well known. I almost went with him. That would have been Moses Malone. I don't think we've honored him yet on this show. Dude was a beast. Absolutely.
I don't think we have. Yeah.
But we're not going to go that route because the rookie of the year is someone that I had never heard of. And it's very rare that somebody who's an MVP or a rookie of the year, somebody at that level, just is so far off of my own NBA historical radar that I'd go, wait, who was that? And I'm sure people who were alive back then, and if you were NBA fans, maybe you recognize the name, but I have never heard this guy's name come up in any context to this. So this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Phil Ford episode. Phil Ford, born in North Carolina, played in North Carolina, and then drafted by the Kansas City Kings.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That name, you know how sometimes like you don't know why you know certain things and like why certain things stick to your brain,
or you don't know why you don't know certain things.
Right. I do remember that name in the Kansas City Kings. Like, not remember, like I wasn't alive here, but I do know that I've come across that name a bunch of times, like doing research and stuff. So his time was at the end of the 70s when he was drafted, right?
Yeah, and so he's rookie of the year in 78-79, didn't start a single game.
Nice.
So he came off the bench for 79 games, averaged 16 points, almost 9 assists, and 4 turnovers, so that's not quite so great. And for the next 2 seasons, he came off the bench, averaging 16 points and 17.5 points, respectively. And I'm not sure if there was an injury in there or what happened, but he starts. I got to look into this guy a little more. Age 25 season, his 4th season in the NBA. He starts 65 out of 72 games, only averages 10 points. And from there, then is traded at the end of that season to New Jersey, logs 7 games with them.
I'm going to tell you this, Joel, you are giving everybody 1,000% more Phil Ford.
Oh, I know, but like this has to happen. Because now I'm just like I'm just going down the rabbit hole. Plays in Milwaukee at age 26, averages 7 points. Houston at age 27, 7 points. And in the 84-85 season, his final year in the NBA, plays with the Rockets, 25 games, started 1, averaged 2 points. So you talk about a guy who like falls off a cliff. I got to look into this. Like, is this a guy where injuries caught up to him? Is this a guy, knowing the time period of the late 70s, early 80s? And I don't want to speak ill where I don't know, but, drugs are a huge issue in the NBA at that time. And it really messed with certain players' careers. I don't know. So I'm sorry if like I'm not making an assumption there. It's just,
you threw it out there though.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that you wonder about with players from that era. When you see a guy fall off the cliff like that.
Yeah. How high was he is what you're asking. How high was Phil Ford is what you're asking.
Your words, not mine. But nonetheless, Phil Ford, we give you major props because you had an NBA career, which we didn't. And, you made it for 8 seasons and you were rookie of the year without starting a single game. Like, there's mad props for that. So here we go. It's the Phil Ford episode.
Well, I hope we do you proud, Phil. Is he alive or dead? Do we know?
He is still alive. Yep. Age 65.
Right.
Basketballreference.com.
Okay.
They're the best, by the way. Basketball-reference.com. Yeah, 65 and 237 days at this point.
Wow. Okay, cool. All right. Today we're going to preview the Northwest Division, which is one that's very near and dear to one of our hearts, and it's not mine. It's not mine. It's someone else's on the show. Before we get to that, I did want to mention a piece of news that came out of this last week that I think is more interesting than all the rest of it, and that's the fact that the spokesman for the NBA, Mike Bass, said that any player who is not going to play because they will not comply with local vaccine mandates is going to be subject to essentially a fine, but it's really a reduction in pay. So the NBA and the Players Association agreed that for every game a player sits out or misses because local COVID-19 vaccine mandates, they will be deducted 191.6% of their salary. So, yeah, I'll do the math on whoever doesn't play Kyrie on what 191.6% of his salary is, or one of 196 point of his percentage. But anyway, it's a small number, but it's per game. So it could, ration out to a little bit higher for guys who may only play half their games because half of them are in New York, for example. And they do have West Coast trips. But anyway, what do you think of, let's just say, the idea that the NBA says, hey, listen, you're not going to play because you don't get this. You don't get the money for not playing.
Good. Like, that's what we talked about last time. And, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came out and said the same thing right around the same time. I think it was like right before we were taping, and I wasn't aware of his quote at the time, but it was essentially the same thing that I had been saying too. Like, I get that there was room for skepticism early. I get if you personally want to take the freedom to not do it. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think it's selfish and irresponsible. Kendrick Perkins, who I rarely agree with, had an incredible quote that said, Kyrie and these guys should go talk to Karl-Anthony Towns and ask him how serious COVID has been. Towns has lost more than half a dozen family members, including his mother, to COVID. Go talk to the people who have lost, and then come back and sit on your selfish horse with the vaccine thing.
Didn't he have it as well? Like, didn't he say like he was?
Yeah, Carl did have it. Yep.
Didn't he say like he lost like 40 pounds or something? Like once he had it, a lot of his body. I mean, water weight and stuff. But he lost a lot of what he was while he was struggling it. And
I don't know the specifics. I don't know the specifics because he was quiet as it was going on. It was really just, hey, it's happening, keep me in your prayers type of thing. But I didn't hear many of the details afterwards. So that very well may be, but long story short, like, if you choose to take that freedom because
I'm sorry, just real quick, just a bow tie. He lost 50 pounds.
Holy cow.
He lost 50 pounds. Yeah. So Kendrick, talk to someone who lost 50 pounds and I think 7 family members because of COVID or something. Come on now.
Right. So if you still, for whatever reason, and again, I think it gets shakier and shakier by the week, and this goes not only for Kyrie Irving, but for, anybody who's holding out and going, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it. Like, it gets shakier every week, the rationale behind it, when you really dig down to why people are holding on to that freedom. But you got it. So if you decide to use it, that is your prerogative.
Right.
But then you got to accept the consequences from that, which may be that certain places do not want to hire you. Or in the case of the NBA, certain places don't want to pay you when you don't do your job because you didn't show up and fulfill the terms of your contract. And I'm sure there will be a lawsuit. I don't know if it will come individually from Kyrie Irving, who says this is the hill I'm going to die on and kill my career on. I don't know if it'll come from the Players Association, but it doesn't seem like they want to die on that hill, especially if 95% of the players are vaccinated already, which is the way it sounds. But good on the NBA for making a consequence if you're going to take this choice. Again, we have the freedom to do it. So ultimately, if you decide to take that freedom, fine. But then don't carp about the consequences when it comes, because you are creating consequences by going unvaccinated that could result in the loss of someone else's life. So I'm sorry if you got docked a paycheck or you lost your job. Sorry.
Every action has a consequence, right? And you don't just get to be willy-nilly Kyrie and just not follow the rules and then not have something happen to you. I do find it interesting that they negotiated.
Let me jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Like, what is the phrase that certain people in the demographic that are wanting to die on, like literally die on the vaccine hill or die on the no mask hill? What's the phrase that they really, really love to shout out in times? Freedom don't come free, right? Freedom ain't free. So you want to use your freedom, it ain't free here. Eat your words.
Too.
Like,
I do find it interesting. You're cool. I find it interesting that they were able to negotiate that for every game missed will still be less than 1 game contract, a 1 game of pay. So like it's interesting that, like, I guess you couldn't. Yeah, the NBA Players Association is very strong.
You know what that is? Why the NBA would agree to that? That is the no lawsuit clause. Because when somebody tries to come back with a lawsuit that this is too punitive, the NBA will fall back on the fact that, oh, we could have gone the entire paycheck because it's breach of contract, but we didn't. I think that's the preemptive if they have to deal with this in court.
I am doing the math right now. If he misses, let's see, $33 million is what Kyrie would make this year, right? $33 million is what he makes. And if you divide that into 91.6 game checks, I guess, it still is the $360,000 plus loss. For Kyrie, that's, again, we're talking silly numbers sometimes. Like when you get to this,
right.
But over not nearly $500,000 and over $250,000 is not nothing, right? Like it's not just, you know, a spit in the bucket. But if he's willing, let's see, do that math, to lose that at least times 41 home games, that's quick math, quick carry the 2, 3. That's $14 million. That's $14.7 million that he could possibly be forfeiting without even considering going through the road schedule to see what's going on, because they'll have to play the Knicks.
And the Brooklyn
they'll play
Nets,
the Knicks because the Knicks are in New York too. And
the Brooklyn Nets should be taking that and donating it to COVID survivors or some other COVID related charity, or I mean, heck, like spread that out and get a gift for all of the health workers in Brooklyn, or do something with it that makes that meaningful, where it's not just saved off the bottom line of the Nets. I would hope they do that.
Let me ask you conspiracy theory. What's to say Kyrie isn't actually just hurt? As opposed
took the words right out of my mouth.
So, like, if you want to placate somebody who you will need for a playoff run at some point, which will happen at home too, and if you want to try to possibly encourage this guy to, you know, get the vaccine, and you don't want to super pressure him right now, what if it's just an ankle injury, right? And you can't get past the idea that it's, you know, hey, this isn't a COVID thing. This is he's hurt thing.
You're going to see that card played at least a few times, at least, unless Kyrie truly, and he is one of the few players, and in this regard, I will say good on him, because even when his principles have been completely out of whack, he's been brave enough to stand behind him, right? Like, he's been brave enough to take the heat. So I will say that for him. He could be one of those guys who goes, no, I'm not going to hide behind the injury card. I'm taking this stand and I'm going to do this. And, you know, I guess I would rather have him be honest and be fine. Like, if you truly believe in that so hard, Kyrie, then be willing to take the pay cut. Like, then put your money where your mouth is, quite literally. And if it really is for principles and no other reason beyond principles, then stand by those principles all the way. And while I again will disagree with your stance 100%, I will have more respect, not that my respect means anything, but I would have more respect for that than going to play the coward route and doing exactly what you just said. Oh, the ankle's hurt. Oh, I got a contusion on my wrist. Oh, like it can be a myriad of things, and it will probably, as the NBA season winds on, be accurate, right? Guys get dinged up, and those nicks and cuts and bruises are legit. It's just a matter of, do you want to sit or not when you got them?
I should also mention quickly that we can move on to the Northwest Division that there were exemptions made in the mandates that I was erroneously speaking about that they don't apply to visiting players. So you can go to California and you can go, or San Francisco specifically, and you could go to Madison Square Garden and you could play without having to have the vaccine. But you don't play all your.
I disagree with that, but
you don't play at Madison Square Garden, right? Like your your games are at the Barclays Center, and that's half of them. So
last question for you: over under. Do you think Kyrie Irving lasts 4 more years in the NBA?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna say under. Like I keep going back to thinking that he's not like he's fine with the NBA. He just doesn't love the NBA. Like he likes being able to play basketball, but if you're going to start making too many more rules on him, he's just going to walk away and say, "I'll do something else." And he's got all the money that he needs to do it. And let me look at how much Kyrie has made so far. He has made a career of stupid money. But I just think at this point, the amount of money that he has made versus the headache he will perceive, right? I don't think it's just going to balance out for him to where he would want to do it, right? Like we can. I'm
going to say we've got 2.5 seasons left of Kyrie Irving in the NBA. We're getting to the point here where, yes, he's buddies with Kevin Durant. We don't know really what his relationship is with James Harden, but there's going to come that point where these distractions that Kyrie brings, even for a very nuanced and complex guy like Kevin Durant, becomes too much of a distraction, because Durant still very much is on the record of wanting to win and wanting to get a title and wanting to make this happen in Brooklyn. And at some point, when Durant starts to lose a little bit of interest in dying on the Kyrie hill, then the Nets are going to lose interest. And when those trade talks start swirling, which we've already heard little whispers, and it may just be the regular old silly rumors that happen, but as those get more, or especially if Kyrie is hurt, or he begins sitting a lot of games, or he begins holding out in protest over some of this stuff, when the Nets try to cut bait and they look for a trade, I will go on record as saying I think Kyrie Irving winds up retiring at a trade deadline. Like just flat out retires at a trade deadline.
Couple of quick things real quick. I was wrong. He's making $35 million this year. I was using last year's numbers, so he's going to make 35 plus this next year. He's only got 2 years left on his current deal, Joel. 2 years left within Brooklyn, including this season. And he's already made just shy of $159 million. I mean, he could take it or leave it, right? Like
Barry Sanders level, type of stuff here looming, I think.
And he's been in the league for 10 years. So like he's fine. He's fine. He may just want to maybe play out the contract, just be like, that's it. I'm good. We don't need anything else. And I'll tell you what, if they're going to make the Kyrie Irving documentary and all the questions get answered and all the participants are truthful, it should be called Dying on the Kyrie Hill. That is what several teams have tried to do. And it's not really worked out for anybody yet. I mean, which is kind of fascinating for somebody who's so good, right? Like it's just not quite worked out for anyone.
He honestly, like, prime Kyrie, Cavaliers Kyrie was one of my favorite point guards to watch, like bar none. And he still is. I still do like to watch him. And look, I mean, he's hijacked 15 minutes of this show, and we're supposed to be doing the Northwest Division. Like,
Well,
He's a storyline. He's a walking storyline.
This was majority of the discussion on how much money players would lose if they didn't get the vaccine. He's the most notable name that hasn't gotten the vaccine mandate. And then I think your question about Kyrie was very interesting about how much more time we may have with them. So, okay, the Northwest Division is what we're talking about on this here podcast. If you have forgotten the Northwest Division, it includes Northwestern teams like Utah, who won the division last year.
And it's not in the Northwest.
Oh, it's very Northwest. It's West. I'll give you West, right? It is West. Utah is the defending champs of this division. 5 games better than the Denver Nuggets, and the Portland finished third. Hey, there's a Northwestern team.
There's only one Northwest team in the Northwest Division.
What's not Northwestern about Oklahoma City?
Yep.
What doesn't scream Pacific Northwest like Minnesota?
I mean, it's all sort of Northwest relative to everything else out west. I'll give you that. But
it's like,
to me, the Northwest Division, like, it should have been the Blazers. It should have been the Supersonics, who never should have gone to Oklahoma City. The Vancouver Grizzlies should be still a thing. Like, then if you want to throw in like the Sacramento Kings in that group because they're in Northern California, and if we got one oddball like Utah or Denver, fine, have at it. But like that's what should be the Northwest Division.
Well, there's not a lot of like perfect name. Like the Pacific Division, perfect. Phoenix, LA. I mean, Phoenix kind of, but it's fairly like you could smell the ocean kind of sort of from Phoenix. The Clippers, the Lakers, the Kings, and the
Suns, fair enough. Yeah. I mean, Suns really should be like in the Southwest. Now here we're getting off track again too. Portland should be in the Pacific.
Well, the Central is Milwaukee, Indiana, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Excuse me. The Southeast, also perfect now that I think about it. Atlanta, Miami. I mean, technically, geographically, but definitely doesn't feel like the Southwest. Southeast. Washington, Charlotte, Orlando. Perfect.
Yeah, and I mean, if I had my druthers with that, I would put New Orleans in the Southeast, and Washington would be up in the Atlantic, and I would move Toronto to the Central, and then figure out the rest of that. Remember, the Central used to have like 1 or 2 extra teams compared to all the other divisions back.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay to have a little extra. You know, you don't have to be all super even. Anywho, let's start with the defending champs, the Utah Jazz. Joel, just talk to me. I mean, we talked about. Did we mention last week the contract extension?
We did not. I don't think.
I swear, like at the end of the show that we did, we may not have. So that's okay. So let's just talk to me. Talk to me, Joel. Man to man. No one else is listening. This division, which features the teams we just mentioned, OKC, Minnesota, Portland, Denver, and Utah. Is Denver good enough? I don't even say better. But their offseason, did they make them good enough to win this division again over the Denver Nuggets? Or, yeah, I think I said Utah over Denver.
You said Denver. So Utah blew everyone out of the water last year in plus minus. Like 3 full points ahead of the next team, which was the Clippers. Utah outscored their opponents by an average of 9 points per game, which is just silly. It's silly when you add all that up. They were 52-20. There was nothing to take away from that regular season where they, again, in a very silly season where there were so many variables, they just took care of business and mowed through people. And yet the entire time, not a single one of us outside of the state of Utah believed in the Utah Jazz. There was always the caveat, always the question of, well, good team, but show me something when it comes to the playoffs, right? Yeah. Over and over and over, we said that. And sure, they won their first round against the Memphis Grizzlies. Things were a little bit tight there. And you run up against a really good Clippers team, and you lose 4-2. Like, granted, there were some things going on. Donovan Mitchell, not fully healthy all the way during those playoffs, was coming back. Mike Conley was coming back from injury. That is a lot to overcome for this team in the particular way that it's constructed, because your 2 superstars, only 1.5 of them are playoff deciding superstar. Rudy Gobert absolutely deserves the MVPs that he's got. He's been a rock defensively, but you don't really run plays for Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is not going to swing a playoff series for you offensively. He's not somebody who manufactures anything. The only guy really who does that is Donovan Mitchell. So when you take him out of that equation, yes, Bojan Bogdanovic, very good player. And yes, when he is a secondary manufacturer of offense and the defense cannot just completely tee off on him, he can get it done. There is no disrespect there. But you take Donovan Mitchell, the guy who's able to create off the dribble, make crazy shots, play at a different pace, play above the rim, do all of those different things. You take him out of that equation, and the defense now gets to load up on Bogdanovic. Like, Mike Conley ain't Grizzlies Mike Conley anymore, and he was never that player to begin with where he's going to take over things for you for more than maybe a couple minutes at a time. You got Royce O'Neal, a non-scorer. You know, Joe Ingles is a facilitator. Again, a guy who can make some shots for you, and you'll run the offense through him, but you're not going to run the whole offense from the scoring perspective through him. The only other guy on that roster last year that you could do that for was Jordan Clarkson. And I mean, Clarkson's a flamethrower. Clarkson, I think, is the heir apparent to guys like Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford and some of those guys who made such a career coming off the bench as just a bucket getter. And that is Clarkson all the way. And he's big. He can play either guard spot, but you don't want Clarkson as that main offensive focus the entire game, because the efficiency starts to wane the more that his usage goes up. And you do give up some very real things on defense if you got to overplay Jordan Clarkson. So they were built as a system team last year. The system worked. The problem with system teams is when you take out one cog out of the system, things don't work right. And we saw that very quickly with Utah. And that's the difference of a team like that versus a team that has a couple of superstars where, yeah, things can all fall apart and go to hell, and you just still run an ISO for Kawhi Leonard or Paul George, and you live and die with that because they will manufacture stuff for you.
So I'm trying to figure out how much I like Utah this season. So Mike Conley, who's been in the league like 15 years, just signed like a big 3-year, like $70 million contract.
Don't love it. I don't love it.
I mean, it's a lot of money for a guy that long in the league who's
been dealing with injuries now the last 3 seasons, right?
I was about to say who's a little beat up, right?
He's 33.
So that on top of Donovan Mitchell, who is, I guess, going into his first full year on this new contract, I think, or maybe it was considered last year, and this year his big mega 5-year contract. Rudy Gobert is getting a ton of money from his contract. It's a lot of concentrated money on a core that I don't know if it's better than. I think last year was best case scenario for them. Like, they played, I mean, outside of an injury, right? Like, I don't know. Listen, I don't even know how much that even sort of would have affected how far I thought Utah was going to go into the playoffs. I think I'm optimistic that they could be better, but like, I don't think, because they didn't do really anything in the offseason.
I am going to tip my cap to 2.5 things they did during the offseason, one of which I think is really, really smart.
Okay.
So when you're Utah and you have trouble attracting free agents, you're good, so you're not going to have draft picks, and you need to try and remedy this offensive manufacturer problem that you have when Donovan Mitchell goes down. So you're not going to get another superstar, but you need to get somebody who can get buckets for himself, but still has to be mature enough to be able to operate within a system, right? It can't just be a guy who goes completely AWOL, because you've already got one wild card in Jordan Clarkson, and you don't want multiple guys like that off your bench. So the pickup of Rudy Gay, who I know is getting long in the tooth, but Rudy Gay has been a walking bucket getter his entire career. He's 35 at this point. And in limited minutes, remember, he's coming from the Spurs now, where he played a very meaningful bench role for the last few years. This is not a needle mover necessarily, but it is a heck of an insurance policy for a guy to come in and eat some minutes. And if Mitchell, heaven forbid, is down again, to at least be able to step into that role and soak up 40% of, what was being missed there. And then very quietly, their ability to get Eric Pascal from the Golden State Warriors, kind of a combo forward, but what Pascal does is score. Like, he is a guy who wants the ball in his hands and he wants to be aggressive and scoring with it. So, they pick up Hassan Whiteside too. He's an enigma at this point. Yes, a walking double-double. He could be very helpful for them. But I think Gay and Pascal, it helps. It definitely helps a need that was identified very clearly last year. Is it enough? That I don't know. And I think that's where you were going with best case scenario.
Yeah, you're 52-20. How much do you think you need, right? To sort of get over the hump. Clearly, you can sort of attribute a lot to Donovan Mitchell being hurt last season going into the playoffs, and I get it. I get it. I'm not as high on Pascal as you are. I do agree with you that I think Rudy Gay
he's helpful. He's helpful, right?
He's a minor steal for them. He's a minor steal for them to be able to get him at this point in his career to be able to be that offense generator for himself. Again, doesn't have to be sort of the center of anything, and he can sort of help that team. But that team's already scoring tons of buckets. So I guess you just want to not have a drop-off, right? I guess when he comes onto the court, which I guess is a fine attribute to want to have. I hadn't even looked into what sort of their bench numbers were compared to the starters when off and versus on, which I think would be interesting to pay attention to. Clearly they have. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think they did enough that makes me think that they are that much better, which is not to say that they're a bad team. It's to say that, they're still going to be a top 4-ish seed in the probably West this year. I just don't know if that gets you to the semis or even to the conference finals, or if that gets you, a first-round exit, depending on who you're playing. Because that West, as we talked about, it's going to be pretty damn loaded.
Yeah. Well, and there is the legit question, how much better can Donovan Mitchell get? Because that's the wild card here. Gobert's not getting better. Conley and Bogdanovich are what they are, which is really good, but that's it. Your bench players aren't going to get substantially better, although, again, Rudy Gay helps. So it really falls on Donovan Mitchell. And when you look at some of the other teams that are kind of young and up and coming, where maybe they're not quite as loaded superstar-wise as the LA teams, but you still get the feeling that, Nikola Jokic has somehow some ceiling left, and Luka Doncic still can get better. And Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton probably still have a little bit more of a rung to get. You look at those teams, and Golden State, yeah, they're not young anymore, but they're also returning a loaded team at this point, if healthy. Mm-hmm. And Utah, you're going, all right, one true superstar in Donovan Mitchell. Is he really a superstar? It's on the fringe. And does he have another level? If he does, they could surprise us. If they don't, yeah, it's a very competent team that will out-execute people and be a really tough draw in the playoffs, and especially during the regular season, because we know Salt Lake City gets rocking at home games. They play really well at home. It's just a really tough team, but you are absolutely right. There's a lot of big guns in the Western Conference, and Utah they need more weapons again.
Even though they couldn't have fans the entire year, they were still 31-5 at home. I mean, it's stupid. It's stupid how good they are at home. By the way, that was the best in the NBA.
And people, routinely don't want to play there, right? OKC, Portland are known as really good home court advantages. Golden State, obviously, especially during their run, but that's always been a loud arena. Sacramento usually gets pretty loud too, even when they're bad. But yeah, Utah has perennially, dating back to the Stockton and Malone days, just been a nightmare place to go and play. And by the way, Salt Lake City's at the same altitude. It's barely any difference between Denver. So that whole Mile High stigma that the Nuggets and the Broncos and everybody plays off of. Utah's actually at the same level. They're just quieter about it.
Look at you. Denver finished second in this division last season, 5 games full back of the Utah Jazz. JaVale McGee is no longer on this team. Denver re-signed Will Barton and JaMychal Green. Austin Rivers and Jeff Green are now part of the Denver Nuggets. Is Denver good enough to overtake Utah in this division with their offseason moves?
Yeah, I think they are. They were locked right into that. And then Jamal Murray gets hurt, right? So
huge.
This is a team where you have one absolute superstar. There's no question about that with Jokic. Yes, he still has his flaws, but they seem to keep, getting lesser and lesser every year. You have a guy in Michael Porter Jr. who is nearing all-star status, just got paid. That's a guy who can manufacture offense. It's a question of, can he be efficient enough while he does it? But then of course, Jamal Murray, absolute flamethrower offensively, not great on the defensive end. You got to kind of cover for him there, but he plays nicely off of the things that Jokic does. And he's a guy where Jokic might not be the one that you run the final shot for, but Jokic is going to set up the final shot and be really good at doing it. And Jamal Murray wants that final shot and can make it. So there's a good dynamic there, I think, especially offensively. Then, secondary guys, Aaron Gordon, I think has a chance to resurrect his career with the Nuggets. He played nicely with them as a guy who gets above the rim and can play off of these passes from Jokic. Like, that's really fun, especially because Gordon and Porter Jr. are both very switchy on defense. Neither of them are great defensively, but they're big enough, lanky enough, and athletic enough to hold their own. And Will Barton, I don't know if he starts again like he did last year. And that was another guy that was hurt when they hit the playoffs. So they didn't have Murray or Barton, kind of like Utah didn't have Mitchell or Conley for very key stretches. Barton is another guy where I would prefer him coming off the bench, but he will get you baskets. It would just be nice to have that punch in the second unit. Monte Morris was hurt for part of last year. They unearthed Facundo Campazzo, who started throughout the playoffs. I mean, that's a usable veteran player. Austin Rivers, I think, he's a veteran at this point, gives you some nice looks. PJ Dozier is a youngster that really got some minutes for them down the stretch, was also hurt down the stretch at the very end. JaMychal Green and Jeff Green, veterans. Like, I just named off 10 players that I'm comfortable giving major minutes to on this team. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the question with Denver before, over the previous few years, was, okay, Jokic is there and there's some good players, but do they have enough help? I think the answer is yes. They have enough help now, and Jokic is maturing. Murray is maturing. They just keep getting better and better. And that's why I like them more than the Utah Jazz, and why, I wasn't sold, for example, on like the Lakers running away with their division, much less the conference. They could do it. I think Denver is like sneakily as loaded as some of these other teams.
I know they finished second in their division, but let's realize that the winner of this division was first in the conference last year,
right?
And Denver was third. So, like, with Phoenix in between. So we're not talking about the difference between the 1 and a 5 seed. We're talking about the difference between 1 and 3, and it's very, very close. And I do think Denver got much better than Utah got. And I think completely healthy. I think Denver, I may have been a year early on Denver and what I thought they could be able to do, because I do think that this team maybe now is mature enough and poised enough and had a little bit of, like what we've talked about before, the growing pains in the playoffs to sort of, and I don't know why it is this way in the NBA, but like you have to get punched in the face before you can go through and be the king. And we saw with Milwaukee, even though Phoenix went right through, it felt like, but they got to the finals and got their heart taken out in the finals. You have to go through some struggles to get there. And maybe Denver last year got through one of those huge hurdles to be able to go deep into this playoffs, back to the Western Conference Finals, and maybe even beyond. I think Denver is legit. Maybe when we talk about getting out our preseason picks, I think I may be going back to the Denver well for my Western Conference champion.
Yeah, I mean, I like them more than Utah. I agree with that. It sounds like you like them more than Phoenix's ability to, repeat and kind of surprise people.
We'll see. We'll see when we get to it. We'll see if I like them more. Maybe. Wink.
Yeah, I'll try not to take too much thunder, but yeah, I mean, and you look at the Clippers. If Kawhi Leonard is a question mark, and who knows if he's back, like that's gonna hurt. The Lakers, for as loaded as they are, there are major fit and major defensive questions, much less the age and injury issues that loom. And that feels like a team that either A, like jumps out really quick because it does click better than we thought, and then gets a little bored, or has those early like chemistry issues where you got some stuff to work out and it takes you 15, 20 games before you catch a groove. And somebody like Denver, if they can jump out to a hot start, may be able to build a cushion that way. And of course, like we've talked about the Warriors a little bit too, as another really good team. It's hard for me to disagree with you. I think Denver was capable last year of winning a title. I think they are capable of winning a title this year. We know that injuries changed a lot, but I mean, let's be real. Injuries change a lot for a lot of teams every single season. And Phoenix was mostly healthy and was able to get through the Western Conference. So there is that element of good health and luck, whatever you want to call it, that plays a major part in which teams hoist a trophy or at least even get to the championship round.
Yeah, but I feel like last year was kind of an unprecedented, the level of stars that went down throughout the back end of the season, especially going into the playoffs.
Knock on wood, I hope we don't see it again. Right?
Was kind of bizarre, and it sort of set up perfectly for a super young team like Phoenix that stayed healthy to be able to get through and get to the NBA final. But again, we're talking about a conference that Denver can win. It's going to be a dogfight for the entire way. But I agree with you. I think this could be a team that starts out 13-3. Like just pops out to like this really hot start, and everyone's in the 9-6, 9-5 start, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, what's up with Denver? And everyone's going to realize that Denver's a legitimate basketball team. So next in the division was the Portland Trailblazers last year, and they're a different team this year. Zach Collins is gone, Enes Kanter, Carmelo Anthony is gone, but Norman Powell's re-signed. Cody Zeller's on this team. Ben McLemore, Tony Snell. Huh? You don't want to just leave out Tony Snell in this discussion. And most importantly, there's one very important name that's back on this team. And it's Damian Lillard. And if it's Dame time, anything can happen time. So talk me up, Mr. Joel C. Cortez. What is this Portland team?
I love the starting lineup. It all fits. It makes a lot of sense together. You've got two absolute flamethrowers offensively at your guard spot, but at the forward spots, you've got kind of undersized defensive first guys who can still knock down a shot. I mean, 2 3-and-D players, essentially. Yusuf Nurkic is a guy you can run plays for offensively. The bench was young for a long time, and they've moved around some of those young pieces. Anthony Simons is still in the mix. Nasir Little will get some minutes, and then the players that you mentioned before, more on the veteran side coming in, although Carmelo Anthony and Kanter were certainly veterans and that sort of thing. So
Carmelo Anthony's 102, so yeah,
right.
He's a fader. And still playing, by the way.
Larry Nance Jr. they pick up from the Cavaliers. Like he can be very helpful, especially if Covington struggles offensively. Nance is a little bit bigger, but also gets you steals the same way that Covington does. So there's not a lot to not like about the Portland Trailblazers. It's a backhanded compliment, but we don't know how good of a coach Chauncey Billups will be. There's a lot of pressure riding on this.
Big wild card.
And not a lot of coaching experience prior to this, but we have seen people come in before, and Billups was one of those cerebral players who was around the block 20 different times in his NBA career. And played for some good coaches, played on some good teams, played on some bad teams too. So there's a wealth of experience for him to draw upon. And it probably is clear, as much as I love Terry Stotts, and he will coach again in the NBA, it probably was time to shuffle the deck, if nothing else, to get a different voice, because they had gone to war together so many times and hadn't been able to get over the hump.
That's
so
an under discussed thing when it comes to coaches and players and sort of teams that, like, at some point, if you're not winning the championships, right, you could still be successful enough. But the message does kind of fall on deaf ears sometimes when it doesn't break through, so to speak. And it didn't quite break through. It got some magical moments. It's some pretty good playoff runs from what we've sort of been used to
and
seeing.
some good regular seasons, right? I mean, they
some
were in the
really good
playoffs
regular
like
seasons,
every year.
But you never sort of broke through. And sometimes it's just it's time for a change in voice.
Yeah, and not only the change in voice, but a change in perspective, a change in approach. You just try something else. It's impossible for humans not to get into a rut. So I wasn't against the idea, again, of them moving on from Stotts, but it's a question of how ready is Billups to utilize this roster? What kind of support staff does he have around him? And where's Damian Lillard's head at? Does he truly want to keep doing this and keep, stubbornly knocking at the door, which very much fits into his personality? And I love that about Damian Lillard. He's very much got that like Reggie Miller type of attitude where he embraces being in that smaller market. He embraces being that guy. He embraces being chippy, lording it over people when he hits those shots. You got to have that moxie really to be able to succeed in a place like Portland or Indiana, and relish the fact that, you don't have banana boat friends coming to join you and you don't just get to go join the defending champs when you were the MVP and go, let's do this, fellas. Like, he has not taken the easy route, and I love that about him. But everybody has their breaking point, and if you feel like, look, I really do want to win a championship, and if you start to lose that belief that it's ever going to happen in Portland, it will be impossible not to play with at least a quarter of your side eye looking out the door. And we all know, you can sense when that starts to happen for a superstar player. I saw that firsthand as a Timberwolves fan. We'll keep it in the Northwest Division.
That's right.
Kevin Garnett. Like, you knew the minute that he had finally lost hope, and he had given a decade plus, but he had finally lost hope. And even though he still went out and battled and played his heart out, it was very perceptible. And you can tell, especially when you're kind of the lone wolf guy. And you look at the Blazers, like CJ McCollum, good player. Yusuf Nurkic, good player. How many all-star teams are either of those guys probably ever going to make? They're fringe. They're fringe. And so really nice supporting players, but you'd love if they were your like third, fourth, fifth wheel, not your second and third wheel on your team. And you've got really interesting role players that fit, but again, when push comes to shove, especially in a loaded Western Conference, it is so hard for a single superstar team to beat a team that has two superstars or three superstars. Like, it's just, this is why the loaded teams and the preseason favorites, unlike any other sport, NFL and Major League Baseball, hockey, the upsets happen more often. But in NBA basketball, the front runners throughout the regular season and the teams that are loaded, they are the ones that win way more often than not. And it usually comes down to that superstar talent.
That's why you want to get loaded, right? That's why you want to go get a loaded team out there.
That should be the new NBA slogan. Let's get loaded.
It's interesting you brought up Kevin
Garnett. Maybe it's in Colorado. Anyway, go ahead.
It's interesting you brought up Kevin Garnett about a decade in. Guess what number year this is for Damian Lillard?
10 years, right?
This is his 10th season. So I admire him for wanting to stick it out in Portland. I admire him for loving that franchise and wanting to give it another shot with them. But you could sort of tell he kind of started flirting with the idea last year, especially this year may go a long, long way in figuring out where the next 6-7 years and the end of his career will be for Damian Lillard.
If they finish like 6th, 7th, 8th seed again, or heaven forbid, or playoff or play-in tournament material, and you'll know when it starts to happen, where a guy starts to talk in the media like Lillard did, talking about the frustration and venting a little bit, but you'll know it's really starting to happen when some of that frustration starts to get vented against teammates, and the frustration at close losses really becomes visible. those are some of the telltale signs. So we've already got a couple of the early ones.
4 years left on this deal, including this year for Dame. So whoever would get him would have him for a little while.
And anybody would want him, right? I mean, anybody will want him.
And the Knicks will get him. So let's just start out there. I mean, we'll have to wait probably at least half the season, but we'll get him somewhere around Valentine's Day or something. Joel C. Cortez, let's look at the next team in this division. The one nearest and dearest to thy heart. It's the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are a scant 29 games out of the division a season ago. Closer than people think. It's your team, so you may have the floor for a little bit. Is there optimism in your eyes? Maybe not necessarily just talking in terms of this year and necessarily this off season, but do you see progression that makes you still have hope?
First of all, I'm just thankful that they haven't been relegated to the G League yet, because that becomes a distinct possibility with some of the absolute incompetence that this franchise has displayed. But I will say this, for the last few seasons, I have thought that the roster overall keeps getting better and better. And then every year, like clockwork, injuries pile up early, they pile up often, and then they pile up again. And the young guys are in over their head. They don't get to play together very much. When they do, some really good things happen, but immaturity jumps in and you lose games that you shouldn't, because those are the growing pains you didn't have a chance to actually go through together. Or when you did go through, it was you by yourself and you were busy getting your butt kicked, and there's only so much you can learn in blowout losses. So competitive. And once again, I look at this roster and I do legitimately think it got better. But like, Karl-Anthony Towns has to stay healthy for an entire season. And yes, last year was a nightmare for him. There was injury, there was COVID, there was losing his mom. There was every factor that would have kept him from really producing. And I said that before the season started, because the COVID stuff and his mom's passing had happened, I believe, right before that season.
That's right.
D'Angelo Russell arrives. Malik Beasley spent some jail time during this offseason and during last year for weapon possession. But they have the number one pick, and Anthony Edwards, like, the dude can ball. I mean, just flat out ball, and was way more aggressive than what we thought. I mean, when we saw in college, there was a little bit of that, like, Andrew Wiggins, Ben Simmons type of stigma, where it's like, yeah, he's really good, but his team is only okay, and he seems to kind of disappear, and he even admitted as much. And then he gets into the NBA, and the first 2 months, like, he started out really hot, and then the scouting report caught up to him, and he had about 6 to 8 weeks where he definitely looked like behind the 8 ball a little bit. He was slow, defenses were stymieing him, and then all of a sudden the light bulb went on. And Anthony Edwards is one of those players that just takes a sick pleasure in yamming home a dunk on top of anyone and everyone who stands in front of him.
He had the dunk of the year. He had the dunk of the year last year.
He had a couple dunks of the year. Like, in all honesty, it was fun. And being able to score from outside, and he competed on the defensive end, and he just played with a motor. And you go, all right, this is what you want out of the number one pick, right?
It's kind of addicting, right? Like, it's kind of addicting to watch a guy like that play so hard for you. And again, this is a guy who hasn't had a big major contract yet, the big one that he'll eventually get to. But to come out the gates to play so hard, get scouted down, and then respond to that, and then to play with that motor night in and night out. Like, it's a guy you want to put people around quickly so you can like try to do something with it and be convinced the guy to be able to want to be there in a couple of years.
And I mentioned this like a month ago when talking about the Timberwolves. I like what they're trying to do with talented motors on this team. Edwards, we just talked about. D'Angelo Russell, yes, he is a sieve defensively, but Russell is another player who is very determined to score. Even when it's junk shots that no one should be taking, he will make way more of those than he should. Malik Beasley absolutely plays with a chip on his shoulder, and I love that about him. I've loved him since the minute they acquired him from Denver. He's got to stay on the court, obviously, but he is just a chippy dog, Patrick Beverley type of player. And oh, by the way, they picked up Patrick Beverley, right?
Yeah.
Jared Vanderbilt is another guy whose motor under the basket as an offensive rebounder and a floor runner is fantastic. And that bodes very well with a star like Karl-Anthony Towns, who so talented, plays with a high motor sometimes, but it does kind of wax and wane. He is a guy who I think is very much helped when he has another spark plug, another motivator next to him, and he feeds off those other players and then kind of spreads that out. If Towns is the only guy who's generating that spark, it hasn't really worked. We saw that when it was just him and Andrew Wiggins. But Towns was phenomenal when he had Jimmy Butler next to him, right? And he could feed off of that. And I kind of see the same thing with like Jared Vanderbilt, who looks like a steal in the draft. They took him in the first round. Lanky, can hit a three, might wind up being the starter over Vanderbilt anyway. Really talented with the ball in his hands, and just like the perfect frame for a stretchy modern four, and the perfect type of complementary player and frame next to what this very offensive-minded team looks like. But is a guy that is kind of out there like Tracy McGrady or Andrew Wiggins, where he just kind of flows and he's just there and he makes plays. But you do sometimes kind of wonder, like, all right, where is that fire burning? I mean, Kawhi does this too, but then Kawhi will give you like those wow plays where you go, oh yeah, yep, that's where the fire was. It was just hidden. So I like that mix. I do think that this is play-in tournament material if they're healthy. When even they had 4/5 of this lineup together last year that they were trying to put together, they were scoring a crap ton of points. Like just an unbelievable number of points, and efficiently too. So there is some real potential there. But once again, like the paper version of what we see in Minnesota has to actually make it onto the court for 75% of the season. And that has yet to happen, really, unfortunately, since the last time they made the playoffs when Jimmy Butler was there.
Yeah, this conference also isn't doing them very many favors either.
Fair enough.
We're trying to get that too. The last team in that division, just by a game, was the Oklahoma City Thunder, who had 29 draft picks this season and used, I think, 4 of them. As far as free agency is concerned, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is now on. He's still on that team.
Mm-hmm.
He's been re-signed. Mike Muscala is re-signed to that team. Kemba Walker's gone. Thank you.
Never played there.
Yep, that's right. He's technically from OKC via into the New York. But do you think if we got a jersey? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I do wonder that though, when guys like pass through.
I think like, jersey.
I mean, Rasheed Wallace, I think, played 1 game for the Atlanta Hawks back in the day, for example. So, like, I mean, he had to have gotten a jersey.
Yeah, I'm keeping that one. Like, all right, well, I'll just take the one that was in the locker. That's fine.
Yeah.
But obviously, this team is young and building through the draft and sort of building through its picks. It still has 37,000 picks over the next 3 seasons. Oh my
goodness, yeah.
So it's nuts for them. Do you see much progress being made by this team now? Because for me, it's hard to tell because they're so young and there's so many dudes. Like they had 4 draft picks, right? Like they had, I think, 3 in the first round, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe only 2, but they were close. Real quick, 6, 18, and 32. So okay, so 2 in the first round and 2 in the second round, but 3 pretty close to being first round draft picks. They're trying to figure it out, obviously, with all the dudes, with young guys and stuff. I mean, you got to use those picks eventually if you're not going to package them up. Your thoughts on what this OKC team is now and what they're trying to do?
So I joked about the Timberwolves being relegated to the G League. The Thunder are actually a G League team this year. No disrespect, guys, because they could be real good within a couple of seasons, but for right now, we
really don't know. We really don't.
Yeah, for right now, the lumps are going to come, and I mean, we'll keep it positive. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, has all-star potential, absolutely. And they sat him last year as they were tanking. He was hurt, but absolutely has all-star potential. Lou Dort has all defensive team potential. Darius Baisley, I'm not sure what to make of him. I think there's fringe all-star potential in there for him, but certainly starter potential. Isaiah Roby, I'll say the same thing about. Alexei Pokasevsky really did some things. I mean, the dude needs to eat a cheeseburger and gain some weight, and they're getting him real young. I mean, he was coming in at like 19. So there's a lot to work with there. But again, you talk about another guy who could be a stretchy modern four who actually has some handles and plays with a really interesting moxie. Like, that's an interesting prospect. Hold on to that one. Theo Maledon had a lot of hype coming in before. And then the rest of the roster is some fringe veteran guys who will be helpful just to keep the lights on. Kenrich, Kenny Hustle Williams and Muscala, and Derek Favors now comes over from Utah. He's going to be the old head in the locker room there. And the rest of them are absolutely prospects, many of whom none of us have ever heard before. And you'll only hear so much during the season because, hey, it's Oklahoma City and they're going to be an afterthought unless your team is actually playing them that night. It's going to be ugly at times. I'm lower on what you will see from Oklahoma City than I would be from like Minnesota or Houston, Detroit or Cleveland, like the other bad teams from last year. I'm probably lower on them than Orlando as well, because I think Orlando's young guys are further along. Again, there's some real health concerns with the Magic, but you got to go through this. You got to go through this step. Like the Thunder are in the process stage of what the Sixers did not so long ago. And it took some time and it was ugly, but there is some talent here. You got to go out and play the games, take your lumps and learn, and then say, thank you, sir. May I have another?
Will OKC end the season with the statistical probability of having the number one pick?
Yes.
Okay. I think
unless Orlando, Fultz is hurt again and Jonathan Isaac is hurt again, and the guys that could help pull the sled for them a little bit. Houston's a big wild card, but again, I think the Rockets are further along than either of these two teams.
I like Orlando more than you do. And I think Orlando's going to be not even close to OKC as far as who's going to be battling for the worst record in the league. I think it's OKC by a mile.
OKC is going to be that team that will get a couple of wins this year when a veteran team pulls into town and uses that as their night to rest their starters, because this is the time to do it.
Yeah,
and OKC at home in a good arena with young legs will pick up a couple of wins that way, and that's about it.
I was going to say, that'll happen 7 times this season, and they'll pick up 5 other wins somewhere else. Like it's going to be tough sledding unless I don't know, some of these guys turn out to be much better than what we're expecting. Like if Josh Giddey turns out to be really good, God bless him. I mean, I will.
I love Gilgeous-Alexander. I love him as a player.
Yeah.
I hope the world for that kid.
All right, it's your division. Let's pick the order of finish. Last year it was Utah, Denver, Portland, Minnie, and OKC. So you may pick first. Who's winning this division and who's rounding it out?
All right, I'll go with Denver. I will go. Man, do I go Portland or Utah? It's so hard.
Boy, you were starting to try. You almost sold me in Portland a little bit.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Denver. Denver. Jeez, I don't know, man. Why don't you go first? No, I gotta pick one. Let's go Denver, Portland, Utah, Minnesota. Minnesota still with play-in potential. And if Portland doesn't get the 2nd seed, they get the 4th. So I've got some caveats here. Denver's either good enough to get that 2nd seed,
hold on, let me
Utah and Minnesota bypass them. Either way, OKC's at the bottom. So I know who my 1 and my 5 are. That's it.
Let me keep a bunch of notes here. Hold on. So you got, if they're not a 2, they're a 4. Is that what's going on? Okay. Joel predicts anything will happen except for the 1 and 5.
Joel predicts we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that Joel says that's why they play the games. I got Denver, Utah as my 1-2, Portland, Minnesota, and OKC. I do agree with you about Minnesota that I think they'll be close to play-in game this season. Like that, they're more exciting than people will give them credit for. Like no one sees them. Like there's no reason to go out and seek them right now, right? Except for Anthony Edwards and a lot of times Karl-Anthony Towns. But like there's the budding, like there's the budding of something kind of nice there. And if you can sort of nurture that and water it a little bit, maybe in 2 years, maybe even next year, you're starting to snip at the back end of the playoff. Like
it's got to happen soon, or Towns may not be there, and then it's Anthony Edwards' team.
So, yeah, and then we're doing this all again, right?
Yep.
They were like, who we're going to pair with Anthony Edwards?
Well, I mean, if the Wolves are smart, you trade Towns, and you hope to get a real haul back. But we've seen how that's gone in Minnesota history when you've had to unload Kevin Garnett and Kevin Love and what have you.
And get the
Stephon Marbury.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Joel predicts that Minnesota wins the West. So I think that's what I read.
Yeah, right. It'll be Timberwolves Knicks in the NBA Finals. Book it, Lou.
Dude, if that happened, do you know how much money? You know why I'm flying to your house for the home games, right? Like we're going to at least Minnesota games there.
Yeah.
Like we're at least traveling to the Timberwolves for one home game. Right.
I mean, the apocalypse might also be happening, so it might be difficult to weave in and out around the meteors, but
I don't mind spending the money if that means it's the last couple of days on Earth to go check out the Timberwolves host my Knicks for a chance to win the Larry O'Brien. So
we'll always have 2K.
What are you saying, Joel? By the way, I just lost an NBA Finals on 2K to Golden State. And can I say something?
It's your show too.
4 years in, right? Been in the NBA Finals 3 times, won it once. This last year was the time I lost a Game 7 to the Golden State. A weird thing happened in the save, so I faced a different team in the West than I was supposed to face than what I ended up facing in Golden State. But the other team,
let's be honest, you just went back and did the old mulligan, right?
No, because I would have preferred to play the team that didn't get saved there, that did win the West, except for didn't save correctly, which was Minnesota.
All right. So, I mean,
what does 2K know? Does 2K know something? Because they're
listening.
That 4 year is coming up this year, I think. The 2K I got is coming up this season. Does 2K know something? I mean, granted, Kristaps is still on my team, and Kevin Knox is like a top 5 NBA vote getter, but that's probably not real. So
that's the Phil Ford episode, everybody.
That's what I'm saying. Something happened. Something's weird. This could be the year. This is the year, Joel.
This is the year. We'll see everybody. Listen to us on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, and YouTube, and we'll be back next week. We got one more division to do, Arky, Shea, right? Southeast.
That is going to be the most fun division to talk about. The Southeast, if you don't know, is Atlanta, Miami, Washington, Charlotte, and Orlando.
I'm pumped.
Don't lie to me.
Oh, you got a division with Trey and LaMelo and some other guys?
Thank you. All right. Goodbye, Joel.